Welcome back on Let's Have It Out. Let's take a call. We have Farouk from Mahikeng on the line. Hi, Farouk. What's your question or comment for us this evening?
Yes, how are you?
Well, thank you.
I think Absa, they are discriminating because if they say you need to have all the documents and you have to be legal in this country. I'm legal in this country, I have business. I do have accounts in all banks, Nedbank. But when I have Absa account, they are ever closing my account every year. Yet even my visas, they are still valid according to Home Affairs. Every year on the 23rd, they close my account. I have a family, I have children. Just to go shopping on 23rd and they have freezed your account. You have nowhere to get proof of residence as they require it. How can you close my account on the 23rd? Even when I want to deposit my money, they have to make phone calls. I can't deposit outside the ATM. Yeah? Imagine. That means they are discriminating because I use Nedbank, FNB, Standard Bank, Post Office, Postbank. They never do that. So where is that Africanistic, as they call it?
So I don't know if you managed to hear Farouk clearly. Basically, he's saying that Absa has frozen his accounts on several occasions. They close his accounts every year. He's got accounts with several banks, but seemingly gets the worst service with Absa, accuses Absa of being of discrimination, and wants to know where is Africanacity in all of this.
Is Farouk still on the line? Because I'd like to know how he was able to get his account reopened, because he says it gets closed every year. That does not appear to make sense.
Unfortunately, we don't have Farouk on the line anymore.
Unfortunately, that's incomplete information, Aurelie. If you had your account closed this year and you were able to open it again, on what basis was it opened?
So you say that...
So unfortunately, I cannot respond to this because it says it gets closed every year, which means it's able to reopen it. So I'm confused. When an account is closed, it is closed. And the customer is informed that the account has been closed. So when he says it gets closed every year, you understand there is a contradiction there because it means it gets reopened every year.
So let's move on to a broader level of discussion looking at the banking industry as a whole. Do you think that banks should take into account the African reality of things? So forced migration, forced displacements, fleeing on the basis of war, of natural disasters. People end up in countries, they're forced into certain situations and along the line get the proper documentation to get a job and essentially need a bank account. Do you think that banks or the banking association as a whole should be more sensitive to those kind of realities and push for some sort of change in legislation so this group of people can be able to do business with you?
So here's the question. Is the South African government taking account of the volume of asylum seekers whose situation is unresolved, especially when we live on the African continent? And is the South African legislation and policy framework responsive to that reality? That is the question, Aurelie, that we should ask. If you want our opinion, we think that should respond to that reality. But policy making or legislation goes through Parliament, which means an MP or somebody like that has got to take up the issue. It's got to be drafted as an amendment to the legislation, and after that, out of that legislation, policies and rules have got to be developed that allow industry to do the same. Banking is not unique. Asylum seekers are not able to find jobs. Mm-hmm. It is peculiar that we would only look at banks as a situation. People who have got certain residency permits are not able to purchase cars in the way that a South African can. There are many, many challenges that refugees, immigrants, and other people who were not born in South Africa have challenges transacting in South Africa and trying to make it in this economy. It's a broad policy conversation. It's not just about banking, but on a principle, the South African government should look at the reality of people who are stuck in this backlog and create a policy framework for banks, employers and others to employ them, open bank accounts, buy homes and buy cars.
And are you pushing as Absa for this kind of policy change or change in legislation?
No, this is certainly not to my knowledge. I've been in the bank for 2 years. A lot of public policy issues come past my desk. This is the first time I'm hearing about it on this show. We will take it up, and I'm quite happy to come back to this show and account for what we have found and what can be done. But certainly, this is the first time.
So what are you, now that you've heard about this perception that's held about Absa being discriminatory or Afrophobic, is there anything that you are willing to put in place to try and educate the public or asylum seekers and refugees on why exactly they cannot have access to your institution and they cannot do business with you? Because there appears to be, as Louise, one of the callers, was saying, and it isn't an isolated case, many people get very different messages at a branch level, where the explanation is not clear, where they're treated rather badly, where they're chased away, where they're asked, what is this document? This doesn't make sense. So what are you going to do, even at branch levels, to educate people on how to speak to certain clients when they arrive and they have a Section 22 permit or Section 24 permit or a maroon ID? What can you do for people?
So certainly we are going to make absolutely sure immediately that all our colleagues, whether it is at branch or any other of our outlets, that they are able to provide adequate service to anybody who comes in. And in the instance that the documents that that potential customer has are not sufficient, they need to be able to explain why they're not able to open a bank account at that moment. That we will do. But I wish to emphasize again, we cannot expect a bank to go outside the laws of any of the countries in which we operate. We certainly are not able to do that. We never wanted to create an impression that Africanacity gives us legal powers to amend legislation and do what we like. We certainly wouldn't be allowed to do that. The Reserve Bank would fine us. The Financial Sector Conduct Authority would also not be happy with us if we did that.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Songezo. It was a pleasure talking to you. That's all we have for this edition of Let's Have It Out. Remember to keep the conversation going on social media using the hashtag LHIO. Tomorrow night, Makosi Khoza will be in this chair. You don't want to miss that conversation. I'm Aurelie Kalinga. Good night.